It's been a very long month, so I'm really not in the mood to play flowery games or anything like that, so we're just going to cut straight to the chase here. I'm going to present a fairly, what could be a very controversial opinion here. Gamers are holding back gaming. Let me drive this point home with one small example. Graphics. Almost every gamer I've ever spoken with wants what they call better graphics. And when I ask why, I get answers like, well, it's more immersive, or I like my stuff to look more realistic. And to that end, game designers have poured millions of dollars into more realistic and better looking graphics. And it's worked somewhat. One of the compliments to Star Wars Battlefront is how beautiful the environment looks. Every sports game franchise every year strives to make the sweat pouring down the athlete's body look more realistic. Game sounds are painstakingly recorded from reality and put into game engines to make them sound more like the real world, but in the end, what's popular? Games like Undertale, Papers, Please, and V6, or however you pronounce that damn game, they spiked in popularity, and that kind of bucked the system. Even more ironic is that hardcore gamers who are playing modern games are going to turn down their graphics settings to sacrifice nice looks for frames per second and performance in game. You could chalk this up to individual preference. You could even chalk this up to people wanting to have a good story over pretty pictures. But we're only starting to scratch the surface on this one. For example, why are we still using this? I'm actually kind of serious. Why do we still use the same basic controller that we've had for over a decade? When you look at it, the modern Xbox One controller isn't really that different than the original Xbox controller, and for that matter, the old Super Nintendo controller. You can make an argument of, if it ain't broke, why fix it, but there's other interfaces out there. The Oculus Touch, for example. Even if it's the same basic idea, it's a different approach to it. And for that matter, why aren't we fully embracing virtual reality rigs? I said in my VR show that I hope it takes off, but I deep down know that a virtual reality's reboot is going to fail. When you break it down, modern gamers are using the same rig that I used in the 80s to play Intellivision and the Nintendo. The only difference is plasma over CRT. You could make a very good argument that price point is actually the issue here, but even if price point was off the table, gamers are not going to embrace the VR headset style of gameplay. I've seen it before, back in the day, with the old VR, the old virtuality stuff, especially the sit-down models. Because people would just sit there and look straight forward as they would play the game and not take advantage of the virtual reality rig to look around. Even though that's what the entire headset was there for. Oh yeah, they would use the sticks and they would look around that way, but they would just sit in the pods like mannequins, staring straight ahead and playing the game. Just like they play every other game. I could say the same thing about pretty much every technology being pushed into gaming. Let's take this vest for example. There's a couple companies making similar, so it's not totally unique. You plug this thing into your console, and as you play a shooter game, the vest gives feedback when you get shot. Literally, the vest has actuators that activate when you get shot, hit, knifed, or similar, so you literally feel the hit. I've also talked about omnidirectional treadmills too, that link into VR headsets. If you want more immersion in reality, you can't get more real than actually moving and actually feeling hits. If gamers really wanted more immersive experiences, why aren't we just throwing money at these projects? The history of gaming is littered with devices rejected by the gaming population as a whole. What is the Kinect's legacy? It's hackable, meaning that it's people using it for completely different applications than playing video games. Whatever happened to the PS Move? And how many people are already screaming bloody murder about that new Nintendo controller before it's even really a thing? Should I even mention the wasteland of PC gaming accessories? Yeah, some found a niche market, but most have fallen off the radar and completely forgotten. The gaming industry keeps on trying to introduce new things, and we keep on rejecting them as players for what's tried and true. A controller, a monitor, and we're done. Okay. You could argue that, well, you don't want to make everybody have to buy all the new hardware and all that other stuff, but again, we're kind of losing focus in the larger picture here. There's just a way that things have always been done. There's just a way that things always have to be done. You can really see this when you jump into online games. Every online game has its unspoken rules. For example, Team Fortress 2, the medic Ubers the heavy, always. No deviation, even if it's tactically speaking a better idea to give it to somebody else. Or even maybe a little less violent. I don't play collectible card games, but I know that in almost every single one of them, there's a specific deck build that people don't deviate from because they win. And MMO boss fights. Don't even get me started on boss fights. Every boss fight has the way to do it, and if you deviate from that, in the best case scenario, you get yelled at. Standard operating procedures just kick you out of the group and grab somebody who does know the way. Any mistake, the battle cry of choice is just wipe it, because obviously the pattern has been broken and now it's, quote, impossible to win. No experimentation, no deviation, don't change anything. I could even make a good argument that this is kind of a social rule in gaming too. You know, no outsiders allowed. You know, don't change anything. Okay, so why is this? Where did this mentality come from? I've got a couple of ideas, but we got to go way far back. Very specifically, we got to go back to the time of the first home consoles. Atari and Intellivision carts really didn't have a lot of memory, so games were pretty straightforward. And there was really only one way to win them, and once you found that way, you stuck with it. So let's fast forward a touch to the NES. Same story, really. Games were not designed to be open sandboxes, a pretty straightforward affair. Brutally difficult, but a straightforward affair. I remember the focus always being learn the patterns in every single game that I played. Now you could do speedruns, you could do challenges like playing the so-called bad characters in games, but mostly if you found a way to beat the game, that's how you played the game, even if it was exploiting a glitch, because that's just the way you beat the game. I think this is part of the very core of gaming culture. We've been trained from the beginning that there's one way to play the game, and deviation is just simply not acceptable. You deviate, you lose. It's that simple. And to a point, games are still designed with that mentality. There's one way to beat a boss fight, there's one way to beat a level, there's one way to solve a puzzle, and once you find it, you stay with it. Even when that way is not right, cross-reference the Ritual and Superstition show. Yeah. But these horse blinders that we wear, this mentality that we have, there's only one way to play, there's only one way to do things, and everything else gets rejected because if you do it any other way, you lose. So, of course, all the new technology is going to be mocked and ultimately not purchased. Why play any other way than the one we know? Besides, I don't want to have to relearn everything. I spent years learning WASD style. If you don't like it, you can leave. And these are the same people that think that I sound like a grumpy old man. It just seems odd to me that gamers will embrace new technology as long as it's just like the old technology. As long as, more graphics, more power, higher def screens. Basically, it's the same thing we've been using for over 30 years. But I also see a culture that refuses to change because of a misguided sense of, tradition? No, that's not it. Stubbornness? I think it's a little more correct. Learned behavior. We'll go with that. The industry also sends us mixed messages. They teach us to never deviate from the one way to win. Don't change. And then they show us new gadgets and ask us to change, and then they're surprised when we don't. We're really only doing what they taught us to do for generations. When I look at the future of video games, I really don't see it changing very much. I don't see any embrace of new technology. We're going to be using the same basic handheld controllers, and we're going to have the same keyboards and same kind of monitors, and handheld devices are probably not going to change much either, and neither are mobile apps. And any kind of a new progress, any kind of a new technology is going to be rejected from favor of the old ways, because, the old ways were always better, and the old ways, that's how we're supposed to play video games. Right? If anyone's wondering why there was no show last week, I put a vlog up on the cycling channel. There's a link up there in the YouTube cards. I'll just tease with this. Most of the time when people say, I almost died, it's hyperbole. Not so much in this case.